Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Beyond Second Cognition. I'm Beall. The topic of this discussion is what is individuality? This is a very important topic, and I know it's going to be hard for some folks to get their heads around what I'm going to say here. A couple videos back, I suggested people pay attention to some of the work that Jordan Peterson's doing on the internet. And I admire the man's intelligence, and he got some tremendous insights on psychology. But what he professes in the way of individuality, and I don't know if you have noticed this, is how to be an individual, the best individual within the herd. You see, Ben Shapiro also tout this kind of individuality. But that's not what we're trying to teach you to be as a free, genuinely sovereign consciousness in your own right. Within the framework that they are trying to teach individuality, they want you to be an individual within the herd. You have to put on the image for herd acceptance. And what we are trying to teach people is that you do not have to use your culture in the eyes of others to measure who you are. We are trying to help people discover that you have your own value and you set your own value. That mores within the culture do not define who you are. Only you can define who you are. Don Juan taught about controlled folly. Controlled folly occurs when you have to go out into that herd environment world and present the image that the herd environment expects to see. For instance, if you have to dress a certain way for your job, then you dress the way that is necessary to perform your job, although it doesn't define you as an individual. Within the herd framework, we have the adage, clothes make the man. That's a bullshit adage, but too many people believe it because the world, the external world, is predicated on image. How many times have you seen people back off from something? Oh, well, it hurts the corporate image. Everything about the first cognition world is image generated, and everything's value or worth is measured through the eyes of the image. So it's all superficial. What we are trying to teach people to realize is that your image does not state who you are. It's like the places I used to work, you know, a couple of them, they would say, well, now you have to wear slacks and a collared shirt and put on this image, you know, and I would ask my supervisors, what I know and does my intelligence decrease because I wear a pair of jeans and a t-shirt? Do the slacks and the collared shirt make me smarter? Does it make me more competent in my job? This is the kind of fallacious bullshit that herd culturalism does to us. When you can recognize your own value and you can be who you are in your own skin and not have to measure it by what other people think or what other people say, then you start to become an individual. If you were dealing with presenting an image in order to present a false front to people, then you're not an individual. You're just a cog in the machine. What we're trying to help people transcend into is that knowledge of you being the person that sets your own value. You don't have to cater to the wishes of others. You don't have to put on the superficial image. As women, you don't have to dress to kill. If you want to dress in pretty clothes because you like pretty clothes, that's fine. But if you're doing it in order to project an image for someone else, and the acknowledgement of that someone else is where you set your value, then you're not an individual. You're measuring your own value and worth through the eyes of others and what others think. To truly become an individual, you have to get past all of this image garnering acknowledgement by external sources. If you can't do this, then you're not an individual. And I don't care how the Ben Shapiros of the world talk about being an individual within the constraints of their herd. You're not an individual. You just think you're an individual. You know, you're still caught in the herd thing. You're still projecting the image. You're still putting on the front, but the difference is the front you're putting on becomes part of your identity. And when the superficial presentation of the clothes you wear or how your hair is fixed or whether your shoes are polished or not sets your own self-image, then you have no self-image. You have an image of a projection. You know, you're like an actor, except the acting role that you're playing establishes your identity within that herd matrix. This is the difference between doing it for the sake of controlled folly because it keeps the friction down and doing it because it sets your own internal gauge of who you are, your own internal measure. If who you think you are is predicated on how sharp you look or what kind of car you drive or keeping up with the Joneses or how big your house is or your rank within a business structure, and all of these things give you your value, then your value system is wrong. You're not an individual. You're riding on titles and clothing and house, and it's all superficial. There is no individuality within this kind of superficiality. You are nothing but living the image. You are the image and nothing more. And just like an actor, you get them off the set, they're not the character they play. Unfortunately, worldwide, most people are the role they play. They put on the front, and they make that front part of who they are, and they measure their self-worth according to the image they project. Moving into the second cognition and beyond takes you beyond having to live the image or use the image to identify who you are and your self-worth. In the herd world, you seek acceptance. You want to be one of the popular kids, or you want to be the person that's most well-liked in the office. All of these things are image-driven, and in the midst of all of it, there's no you. There's only an image. There's only a superficial presentation to garner support from those around you and let them dictate your worth. And this is why people have self-esteem issues, because they don't measure up in the eyes of others. What we're trying to teach people is to measure up in your own eyes and fuck what others think. You know, their opinions do not make who you are. They do not live in your skin. Why should you allow them to set your value because this is what the culture says? Or this is what my religious morals say, or this is what my corporate mandate is. This doesn't mean that you don't go out and present the image for their consumption, but don't become the image. And this is where people fail, because they make the image, they paint it on the inside. So they're no different on the outside than they are on the inside. When you become the image, you're not an individual, no matter how you beat your breast and scream at the sky about, hey, I'm a free and sovereign individual. If you're catering to the image that other people expect of you, and you want to be liked, you know, your personal value doesn't have any, there's no determination there where your value is determined by somebody else, whether they like you or not. If they don't like you, fine. That's their thing, not yours. Why should their opinion shape who you are? Are you not secure enough in your own skin that you can be an individual without worrying about what others think? But if you look at the world around you, this is how all of our culture works. Everybody puts on an image. You know, we have politicians that are consummate liars. They make a career out of lying. But hey, they look sharp. They put on the image. So the image doesn't mean shit. And when you equate the external image with the internal self, then you're a shadow. You're just a hollow person. There is no individuality in that. And until you can learn to be comfortable in your own skin and use controlled folly to present the image to keep the other side pacified, then you're not an individual. The difference is you're not making the outer image a reflection of the inner you. And this is what Don Juan meant by controlled folly. You give the culture what it expects to see, but you don't make that image that the culture expects to see part of who you really are. And this is where you draw the distinction, because most people out there, they don't act on controlled folly because how they present themselves is how they are. The inside is the same as the outside. The image is the same in-wise as it is out-wise. You're never going to be a totally sovereign, cognitively free individual so long as you're letting others set the standards for who you should be and who you think you are. So all of this rambling that's going on out there in the public about, well, be an individual, but if you listen to the dialogue, it's be an individual so you can make the best image socially. Do you want to be a social image, or do you want to be a cognitively free individual, being able to live comfortably in your own skin, regardless of what the social imagery demands? I mean, how much angst have you in your own life when you look at putting on this image and conforming to the image, trying to make the inner look like the outer? How much anxiety do people go through trying to live up to the standards of other people, their culture, their religion, their job, all this other kind of stuff? When you start bending the inner you to conform to the outer you, the individual, disappears. You become nothing but a reflection of the herd, which reflects itself back to you. And if you happen to be one of those people, like most, who can't quite measure up to the social mandates, the external image requirements, then you wind up living a life of quiet anxiety. Why am I not good enough? Why don't people like me? I mean, you know the diatribe because you probably lived it. So when you get tired of trying to measure up to the image mandated and dictated by others, and can learn to live who you are regardless of the clothes you wear or the image you have to project through controlled folly to the external world, then you're not going to suffer these anxieties, because the anxiety results from trying to measure up to other people's standards, not measuring up to your own standards. You have your own self-worth. Everyone has their own self-worth. And your self-worth is not measured by what the fucking herd says. And this is the message that I want to share with our listeners here about individuality. Because there is no individuality if you are seeking to please the herd. Whatever herd environment you are, your political party, your religious ideologies, your circle of friends, if you're out to please somebody else, 9 times out of 10, you're not pleasing yourself. You're putting on a show. And the vast majority of humanity lives their lives putting on a show and striving to do that and being anxious because they can't measure up. When you set your own internal goalposts and the only person whose standards you have to measure up to are your own, then you become an individual, and the external play, the external image becomes nothing but a controlled folly role that you put on to make the others leave you alone. It's as simple as that. So if you want to know the distinction between what we're trying to teach people about becoming genuinely cognitively free human individuals versus an individual within a social structure, this video should clarify all of that. Set your own standards of being who you are, and don't let the world dictate the standards of who you think you should be, because that's what the world says. For those of you doing the work, stay the course and don't give up on yourselves.